Last week, I talked about the latest round of drama around the AEW women's division, coming out of that Britt Baker-Taya Valkyrie match and the sign they showed on TV about the booking, right? Book the women's division better. This ignited a debate online around the booking of the women's division. And that's when LuFisto, who has been a mainstay in women's wrestling on the independent scene for over 20 years, posted a vague, cryptic tweet saying, "It's cute how people blame booking for a bad women's division. Talent with too much power, talent denigrating each other, talent trash-talking potential employees so they never get in as soon as they walk in. It starts here. Signed, the one you called an effing French-Canadian asshole." Immediately, people assumed she was referring to Britt Baker, who has been an easy target. She's become the boogeyman or the boogie woman when it comes to criticizing the women's division, rightly or wrongly, right? That's the first name a lot of people pile on and go after whenever these rumors bubble up, right? Britt Baker is, she's an easy target. But Sean Ross Sapp made it clear LuFisto was not referring to Britt Baker with that tweet. So in that specific instance, she was not referring to Britt Baker. Now, LuFisto never did come out and refute this or clarified this when people started piling on Britt, which was pretty shitty. But she did eventually reach out to Fightful. She offered to give them an interview, and it was a lengthy one. It was one that made the entire division look like, well, I mean, probably a lot of other wrestling locker rooms over the years, filled with drama and dumb high school level BS. This is hardly an AEW exclusive problem. But even if some of what she said is true, and I believe it probably is, then it is an AEW problem that should not be ignored. And a lot has happened since then, with LuFisto deactivating her Twitter account yesterday because of all the, I guess, the verbal abuse that was being lobbed at her. The social media cesspool strikes again. I don't know why people continue to be surprised by this. Now, I am not going to read this entire interview to you here because I'll look like fucking Moses by the time I'm done, and frankly, some of the more minute details are not really important, but she first tried to clarify her original tweet, which I think she should have done earlier, but she tried to clarify the tweet by saying, "I don't know where to start, but it's really something that has been bothering me for a while. It's been over a year that I had that dark match at AEW. There are so many things that happened that night. Things that I heard from other women that are working there that had tryouts that were extras as well as men who are currently employed. Of course, I know people want names and everything. I'm willing to give the names of people involved in my story, but of course, if anybody confided in me, I can share the story, but out of respect, I'm not going to share the name of someone who doesn't want to lose their job or is looking for a job. They trusted me enough to say you can tell it, but not the name, so I'm not going to do it." She is referring to a match. When she mentioned that dark match, it was a match over a year ago on the April 6th, 2022 tapings in Boston, where she worked a match on Dark Elevation. She was teaming with Emi Sakura and the Bunny against Ruby Soho, Anna Jay, and Sky Blue. She was invited in for a match, but also she was hoping to get a face-to-face with Tony Khan that night because she was interested in becoming a coach. She never did get her meeting with Tony Khan. She kept getting the runaround. She kept being told he was too busy to meet with her. But she implied that Ruby Soho was talking shit about her to Tony Khan and to Dustin Rhodes, who works with the women. And that Dustin's whole demeanor with her changed after Ruby said whatever it was that she said to him. She said, "I go to the restroom. As I open the door, I hear, 'She something something.' I open the door, and on the table, Ruby Soho is sitting with Dustin Rhodes. And they just shut up, and they look at me." Okay, they were talking about me, that's for sure. Ruby is like, "I have to go." I go to Dustin, and he goes, "So, all French-Canadian people are fucking assholes, eh?" I'm like, "Excuse me, what? He was nice to me 5 minutes ago." She also kind of threw Sky Blue under the bus in this whole interview when she was talking about being in the back before the trios match, trying to help put things together. She was the only one in the match not signed to a contract, she said. So she didn't want to speak out of turn, but she basically said Sky Blue was like a mute who wouldn't offer anything, wouldn't say anything. She said she's either bland as a person or she's not allowed to talk. This was nearly a year and a half ago. Sky Blue would have still been 21 years old. She was still relatively new to all this. So it's very likely she just didn't feel comfortable offering suggestions to somebody who has been doing this a hell of a lot longer than she has. So poor Sky Blue is caught, she's caught in the middle here. She's catching a stray bullet for no reason. But from her original tweet, the issue was with Ruby. It was not with Britt. LuFisto and Ruby, they worked together in 2015 on the Indies. LuFisto said the first match they had was good, but there were issues after their second match. She said the first time it went really well. Both matches, I think, were really good. We got good comments, the promoter was very happy, the crowd was into it. The second one, my nose got broken, and she always had a shoulder injury. I heard people say, oh, you hurt her in that match. She was hurt before, and I asked her, do you want to do something besides the burning hammer? It's already real bad, it doesn't matter, it can't get any worse. With the nose, it was a hit that came quickly, it happens, it broke my nose. The only thing I said was, after this hit, my nose was completely messed up. There's nothing I can do with it. I was always able to replace it myself, but it was past that. It's not because she messed up my nose. It's because it's been broken so many times, and then it was over. Why would she say that I injured her when everything was fine before? I saw her after. It was fine. And I do believe, by the way, that Ruby would have been hurt because when she had the double shoulder operations, at the time, she talked about not knowing that her shoulder... I don't remember if it was a torn rotator cuff or exactly what the injuries were. But apparently, her doctor told her, hey, you've been wrestling for 10 years with these injuries. And she just didn't know, or she didn't know how bad it was. That's why Ruby had the double surgery and she missed a whole shit ton of time when she was in WWE. So the idea that she would have been hurt even back then, I can believe that. But I should also point out, in 2018... LuFisto tweeted that she recently learned the only reason she didn't make it to the Big Fed, meaning WWE, is because someone politicked me out. She said, for the first time, I'll say this, their loss. I still give my all each time I step in the ring, even after 21 years in the business. I effing kill it. She tweeted that 5 years ago. So I guess we now know who she was referring to in that tweet 5 years ago, since Ruby was working in WWE at the time. Did Ruby hold a grudge and talk shit about her when she was in WWE? And when LuFisto came to AEW? Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But a lot of wrestlers have come to Ruby's defense. That doesn't mean that her hands are clean here. Just because she's well-liked. Look, if this woman has an axe to grind with LuFisto, maybe she went to management to give them a heads up about hiring her. Maybe she thought that she was more trouble than she was worth. And that would be a pretty shitty thing to do if she was costing this woman opportunities by doing that, but we don't know if she did or not. Nicole Matthews tweeted, you know who's one of my absolute favorite people I've ever met in professional wrestling? Ruby Soho. After not seeing her lovely face in 5 years, the second I saw her at AEW, she ran up and gave me the most giant hug. It was like no time had passed at all. One thing she said that stuck to me was, you always remember the ones who treated you right on the way up. Funny that. You don't have to work too hard to read between the lines on that one. Beyond her own experiences that she shared in this interview, one of the themes that she talked about, she kept coming back to, was the very cliquish nature of the AEW women's locker room. And women there only looking out for themselves instead of trying to make the division better. She said, I'm telling my story and my experience for people to understand that the reason why this division doesn't work is the gatekeeping of it. It's not going to get any better as long as somebody doesn't stand up. Everybody is afraid to talk. Everybody doesn't want to say what I'm saying right now. I'm even struggling right now, but someone has to say it. Unfortunately, it's the 43-year-old that's doing it because everybody is so afraid to lose their freaking jobs that they don't say anything and they accept things that should not be. Somebody has a tryout and you make sure they look bad. I'm not even talking about myself because I didn't look that bad. I was told following discussions some girls are asking for guidance and make sure they look bad so they don't come back because there is genuine interest in them. The girls fighting with each other, I hear it all the time. My ship has sailed. I'm aware of that. One thing, though, I love wrestling with all my heart, so if somebody wants to say that I'm bitter, I say fuck you. I go out there every weekend. I love what I do. I've been to court to defend women's wrestling. The thing that I do not accept, and it's what's going on at AEW right now, women are shitting on women when we should be helping each other and lifting each other up. If you're not good enough to be out there and prove you can go, and you have to go through politics and people you're with, you don't belong in the sport. Right now, it's filled with people who use wrestling to have that fame. The ones that really fought hard for women to be seen as athletes, that we work together. One of the problems, men are in charge of the women's division. I'll be honest, they don't care. They will put their friends in spots before the women. If you stay up there because you're in your comfort zone, it's not going to change. You need to stand up. You need to speak your mind. Do it politely, but you can't have people running the whole thing with their friends, with their clique, and expect women's wrestling to change and people to give it time. It's not going to change if you don't have people who are passionate about what women's wrestling should be, when it's just the people who are out there who want to be out there and have a certain power. And it doesn't go with what is the best product that you can put up. I'm not going to have my 26 years of wrestling wasted on women who do not deserve to be there. Not because they're not good, but because they are terrible human beings. They're narcissists, and they only think about them, and they do not think about women's wrestling as a whole. One thing I will always care about is that women wrestlers of today, the ones that came after me in my generation, I don't want them to go through the same bullshit that I had to. The politics, the abuse, the guys grabbing your asses backstage and being screamed at puppies and whore, and that women's wrestling sucks. Women's wrestling sucks if you allow it to suck. By letting your talent that shouldn't be there in charge do what they're doing right now, you're allowing women's wrestling to suck. That is where I draw the line. Now, later on, she tweeted, had a 1-hour phone call with a current AEW talent. The women who actually addressed the problems I did today were the ones sent home by Tony Khan. There was a meeting to shoot on Thunder Rosa that Tony Khan attended. Before leaving, he reminded them that their segments were the lowest. When some girls arranged a meeting to talk about Britt Baker's crew, one of them ran to Britt to let her know. The girls that wanted to address the problem were the ones punished. Things did not get better, they got worse. The legitimate wrestlers believe Tony doesn't give a damn about women's wrestling and feel like they are going back to the Divas era. Ask me who the fuck I am. Tell me I'm irrelevant and that I'm doing this for attention. Call me a liar. Tell me to kill myself. You keep on closing your eyes and supporting human beings with shitty behavior. With the messages of support, and especially this phone call I got from AEW employees, this nobody did the right thing. For what it's worth, Britt Baker responded to a fan on Twitter who asked about this claim. And she said, false. Thunder called the meeting to discuss multiple/personal issues. There was no meeting to, quote, shoot on her. These are salacious Twitter rumors. I'm sure when she is ready, she can help clarify. So now, Britt Baker has put Thunder Rosa in a position that she probably does not want to be in, where she now has to jump into the mud with everybody else and respond to this shit. And it's alarming that certain women on the roster may have spoken up about some of the problems that were going on, namely related to Britt Baker and her friends, and were punished for it. Now, are we saying that LuFisto is just making this stuff up out of thin air? That she wasn't really contacted by a member of the AEW roster and told these things? Because she's being pretty specific in some of these accusations here. That's pretty fucked up if that's the case. If there's any truth to anything that she just said in that last quote, that is fucked up. Is she known to just make stuff up like that? I don't know. I'm asking a serious question. I don't know this woman. But she's been around for over 2 decades. I'm not aware of her being known as somebody who just fabricates stories. And if even some of what she is saying is true, I would say that's troubling, to put it mildly. Is Tony Khan protecting people, be it Britt Baker or anybody else? Is he playing favorites at the expense of other people in that division? That doesn't sound to me like people who want to make women's wrestling as great as it can possibly be. It sounds like there are people putting their own agendas ahead of the overall agenda, which should be to make the women's division as strong as it can possibly be. Now, of course, that's ultimately up to one man. That man is Tony Khan. Tony Khan is the one making the matches. He's the one putting these shows together. Mike Johnson of PW Insider said the meeting that LuFisto was referring to was actually requested by Thunder Rosa and was said to be positive, with everybody addressing whatever concerns there were at the time, and at the end of it, they all agreed to move forward, and that was it. So either she's got her lines crossed up, or maybe it's just a communication thing when she says the meeting was called to shoot on Rosa. If Rosa called the meeting and it was open for people to just voice their concerns, like, speak now or forever hold your peace, let's just cards on the table, let everything fly, then maybe that could be taken as people were shooting on her because they were voicing their concerns at the time. But at least according to PW Insider, it was said to be a productive meeting, and that was the end of it. It was not contentious. It did not lead to more bad blood. It was a positive thing, and then that was the end of it. Now, the first couple of days after all of this broke, things were quiet from the AEW end. And then came Friday. And on Friday, the floodgates opened and the AEW locker room went nuclear on LuFisto in a united show of support that I have never seen before. And it just so happened that all of these messages were posted around the exact same time. It came across more like the memo went out or the group chat went out, and they all decided to push send at the exact same time. They could have at least done a better job of spreading things out, because what this came across as was damage control. That's what this was. First, we had the AEW World Champion MJF on Twitter, lobbing bombs at LuFisto. He said, if you listen to miserable people online who never made it in this sport, that's not exactly the brightest thing to do. Use your brain. If someone's been in professional wrestling for over a decade and you find them to be talented, but they never truly panned out, there's a reason for it. Number 1, lack of talent. Number 2, difficulty to work with. Number 3, delusional. Just to name a few. People love to talk ill of companies and will say things like, I'm the only person who's brave enough to speak up, when in reality, the only reason you're spewing bullshit is because you were aware deep down that you were not going to make it. So what's the harm in spewing reckless lies and trying to hurt hardworking, talented people on your way down to obscurity? We have an amazing women's locker room. Sorry, not sorry. I see he's really taking this babyface turn very seriously. Those are some pretty harsh words from MJF. But I will say, I do find it strange that somebody who has been doing this for over 25 years, as LuFisto has, and seems to be, or seemed to be, up until this week anyway, I guess not by the AEW locker room, as well respected as she is, it's strange that she never signed a contract with any of the top promotions in that entire time, over 2 decades. And it's obviously not for lack of trying. I guess when she was first making a name for herself, because she debuted, it was probably late 90s when she first debuted. So she was really first making a name for herself, early 2000s, mid 2000s. There was no so-called women's revolution happening in wrestling. That didn't come until much later on. But I also think back to TNA and, when the Knockouts division was really starting to blossom behind Gail Kim and Awesome Kong. What was that, 2007? 2008? Why didn't she end up there? Why wasn't she part of that division? It does beg the question, why? The lack of talent part that MJF mentioned isn't it. I mean, she's obviously talented, so it's got to be something else. She's attributing it to politics. All right, that's why I didn't go to the big Fed. Somebody told me it was politics. Okay, but why? I can't see one woman, unless they were a top name in the company, which Ruby Soho, I like Ruby, but Ruby is not a top name. She was not a top name in WWE, and she's not a top name in AEW. I can't see her single-handedly sabotaging this woman's chances of getting into all of these companies. It just doesn't make any sense. Renee Paquette tweeted, we have an incredible women's division that all look out for and support each other. I've never seen it be anything other than a safe space for a bunch of kick-ass women that all want to see each other and all of AEW shine to their full potential. Women hating women is a real dusty take. Taya Valkyrie tweeted, this narrative that all the AEW women hate each other is quite frankly annoying. I've been there for 5 months and everyone from the second I walked into that building has been nothing but supportive, hyping each other up. Stop pinning women against each other, it's getting old. Soraya tweeted, "The narrative going around is very disheartening considering someone says they want the best for women's wrestling but buries it in a number of tweets. I will say, being in this company close to a year, my favorite part is being with the girls in the locker room. They uplift, support, and laugh with each other every week and only want the best for each other. We hype each other up. We buy each other wrestling gear sometimes, just as a little surprise. We text each other every day, and we are there as a shoulder as well. This is one of the best locker rooms I've been in, and I refuse to let people twist it to be otherwise." Ruby Soho posted what she said would be her only statement about this on Friday afternoon. "The women in the AEW locker room don't just claim to be in support of women's wrestling, they show it. Whether you see it or not, the ones who don't ask for credit after they stand in gorilla and cheer for two women who beat each other to a pulp for your amusement, the ones who lend an enhancement talent their knee pads because they forgot theirs at home, the ones who sit in the locker room with a sobbing peer for an hour to console her when she's having a bad day, those women are silent heroes. Just because the voices you hear are the loudest does not mean these voices are speaking the truth." AEW's women's division has problems. No amount of tweeting from the wrestlers there about how much they love being in that locker room is going to change the fact that the women's division is a mess and has not been given the attention that a lot of them probably wish that it would be. Whether they want to admit it or not a doubt in my mind that a lot of them are probably very frustrated at the lack of time for some women, the lack of time for some of the matches, the fact that it's not being paid the same attention that, the men are. I'm sure those frustrations are absolutely a real thing. But it can also be true that LuFisto's portrayal of all the backstabbing and all the shit talking, could it be overblown? Sure. But for all the harmony I see in these tweets about how warm and welcoming the locker room is, it might do them some good to keep that same energy and approach their boss about what he's been doing with the division. People have spoken before in past interviews about the lack of organization and the lack of structure behind the scenes and how chaotic it can be. That starts at the top. Last August, about 4 months after LuFisto's tryout, Tony Khan expanded his talent relations team. He hired Madison Rayne as a coach for the women. QT Marshall, Sanjay Dutt, Pat Buck, and Tony Schiavone, they all ended up with expanded roles behind the scenes, specifically to try to alleviate these types of problems. Has that lack of structure improved in the years since then? I hope so. Funny enough, the one thing that LuFisto says she wanted more than anything, which was to unite all of the women and have them work together instead of against each other, looks like it finally happened. She got what she wanted after all. Unfortunately, it came at the cost of her killing her career after 26 years. WWE is never going to hire her after this. AEW is never going to hire her. She knows that. And maybe she knew it even before she gave that interview to Fightful. Maybe she felt that she had nothing left to lose. Or maybe she was genuinely bothered by what she saw as a locker room eating its own. This is what she's being told. This is what she saw that one day. And it was just one day. But again, she's heard from other people. She was on the phone, she claims, the other day for an hour with somebody who works there. These are the things that she is either seeing or being told. And maybe it genuinely bothers her. I think both of those things can be true. I think there can be politics and dysfunction behind the scenes. And disorganization is one of the things she also talked about in that interview. You know who else talked about that after she left the company? Big Swole. Talked about the lack of structure behind the scenes. And what was that, 2 years ago that she left? This isn't the first time we're hearing about stuff like this. This is not an isolated incident. What I do know is the way some of the AEW fans have dogpiled on this woman just because she said bad things about their beloved AEW, and some of the insults that I saw directed at her were disgusting. The women on that roster, they're well within their rights to clap back at her if they think LuFisto is telling lies. But I don't believe everything is as hunky-dory as they make it out to be. I hope for their sake that they take all that energy we saw from them this week on social media and they use it for good in their own locker room. Use it to build each other up and not tear certain people down, because women's wrestling is clearly not a priority for Tony Khan. Just because Tony Storm and Hikaru Shida headlined Dynamite this week, and what interesting timing that was, that doesn't mean there aren't problems. It's okay to admit that there are problems. Not every negative criticism has to be defended to the death. But I hope they take this experience and they turn it into a positive. Playing politics in wrestling is nothing new. But that's the last thing they need to be doing when they're already struggling for scraps on Wednesday nights.